Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Ankush here from Alif Consulting. Welcome back in our partner enablement video series. In today's video, we will be going to talk about how to build and design a multi-forest with Active Directory Domain Service, Azure Active Directory Domain Service, and Azure AD. Well, here is the agenda of our video. So we're going to have a little introduction about the directory services, and then I will be going to walk you through with what is Active Directory Domain Service, what are the benefits, and then we'll be going to talk about Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory domain services, and then we're going to walk you through with the reference architecture, key components, and the course. And the end, we will be going to have a little demo on it. Well, let's quickly jump to the introduction. So, Forest is a logical constructed used by Active Directory Domain Service to group one or more domains as a domain that store the object of user or groups and provide the authentication services. Right. So the Active Directory Domain Service is the logical construct. It's kind of a logical structure which is kind of a group of one or multiple servers. And what is the work of Active Directory Domain Service is to store the information about all the objects, either it's a group, either it's a user, either it's a computer. It's allow us to store every information about those objects, and at the end it's provided us the authentication service. At the same time, Azure Active Directory Domain Service is the managed domain. The forest only contain one domain or can have two replicas. Uh, it's quite I can say a difference in both of them, because Active Directory Domain Service and Azure Active Directory Domain Services both work in different way, although they can provide a similar set of functionality in some way. But functionality, I can say the work and the features which they have is quite different. And again, the on-premise Active Directory forest often contain many domains. It can have a multiple domains like maybe abc.com, xyz.com, 123.com kind of way. But with Active Directory domain services, which is provided by Azure and it's completely managed, that doesn't have a this kind of scenario. That's only have a one domain, which is basically getting connected with the Azure AD. In large organizations, especially after mergers and acquisitions, you may end up with the multiple on-premise forests that each then contain a multiple domain. So again, if you have a multiple forest, or if you have a multiple organizations, they might have a different forest created, and at the end you might be end up managing the multiple domain forest. Well, this is how your Active Directory domain looks like. So Active Directory domain service store the information about the all the objects on the network and make this information easily available across the network and easy for the administrator and user to find and use. Active Directory use a structured data store as the base of logical hierarchy organization of the directory informations. So at the right side, if you see, this is how your forest look like with the Active Directory domain service. You have a multiple domain controllers, and their domain controllers are basically getting connected to each other, and getting replicated to each other also. So if you are doing any changes in the one domain controller, they will be getting replicated to the another uh, domains also over the network, right? So they have a secure link created whenever a new domain is added into the existing forest, and as soon as they has been connected or they has been configured with all the required features like the Active Directory domain service and DNS, they will be automatically getting connected to the each other, and the replication will be started happening, right? So there are the few benefits of having the Active Directory domain service in the network. You can customize how your organization uh, can manage the data to meet the company need. That's something you can do. You can manage the Active Directory domain services from any computer on the network if necessary. Active Directory domain service provide built-in replica and redundancy. If one domain controller fails, another domain controller picked up the load. That something is already there and built in the replica. As I told you, they will be getting connected to the each other using the secure channel, and whatever the changes happening on the one domain controller will be getting replicated to the all the forest. All access to the network resources go through Active Directory domain services, which keep the network access right management centralized. Again, this is something is not automatically going to be happen. You have to manage those devices, and you have to manage or add them in the domain controller, else they will be going to work as an individual. So let's take an example. There is an organization who want to use the Wi-Fi authentication with Active Directory domain services, right? But that is not going to be happen until unless you have added that Wi-Fi controller in the Active Directory. You have configured the radius, and then you have enabled the authentication using the Active Directory domain services, right? So again, you need to understand, or you need to think about it whenever you are having a network resources in the network, and you want to manage them using the using the Active Directory domain services, right? So you have to add them in the domain controller, then only you would be able to do it. Well, let's understand the Active Directory domain services in Azure, which is also known as a Active Directory. So how these things has happened, the heading is little bit wrong actually. It should be Azure Active Directory. So it's a cloud-based identity and access management services. That services help your employees or organizations to access the external resources such as the Microsoft Office 365, SAPs, Azure portal, and stuff like that, right? Azure Active Directory also help the access internal resources like the apps on your corporate internet network, along with any cloud app developed for your organization. So as I told you, right, Active Directory domain services, which is there, is kind of provide you the authentication within the organization, and it's kind of LDAP authentication, right? At the same time, Azure Active Directory, which is a cloud-based solution, help you to access all the cloud services across the Microsoft. At the same time, you can have your Azure Active Directory integrated with any kind of SaaS solutions, right? Maybe on a SAP, GoToMeeting, ServiceNow, Dropbox, AWS. You can have Azure Active Directory integrated with all of those services. At the same time, if you have your application in development and you don't want to go and have your LDAP integration there, and you want to use SAML, open auth kind of authentication methods, that's something you can have it in place by having your application integrated with Azure AD. Well, here are the benefits of having the Azure AD. So you can do a lot of things like application management, authentications. In authentication, you can do a self-send password reset, multi-factor authentication, custom band password list, smart lock, stuff like that. You have Azure Active Directory for developer. You have a multiple versions of Azure Active Directory like Azure B2B and B2C. You can have a conditional access, you can have a device management, you can have your domain services, like you can join your systems in Azure Active Directory. You can have your hybrid identity that allow you to connect your on-premise Active Directory with Azure AD, and in that way what is going to be happen, all the users from on-premise can replicate to the Azure AD, or you can replicate specific OU or specific groups to be replicated on Azure. You can have a identity governance, you can have a identity protections, you can have a managed identity for Azure resources. That is a one of the case where Azure Active Directory is came in and allow us to have a seamless authentication using the managed identity to from the Azure resources. Uh, Privileged identity management and reporting and monitoring. So these are all the benefits which is there having the Azure Active Directory. Well, let's understand what is the Azure Active Directory domain services. So Azure Active Directory Domain Service is the extended version of Azure AD. Uh, Azure Active Directory Domain Services provide the managed domain service such as a domain join, group policy, lightweight directory protocol, and Kerberos and LTM authentication. You can use these domain services without need to deploy, manage, and patch the domain controller in the cloud. Now, think about it, right? You have the Active Directory on premise and you are managing it, and while doing the management, what you are doing it, you are doing everything, right? You are doing the patching, you are doing the security management, you are doing the firewall management, you are doing the monthly maintenance, stuff like that, right? That's something you're doing it with when you have your Active Directory domain controller on the on-premise. But now we have a managed services which allow us to do all the group authentications, allow us to domain join, allow us to create and manage the users, allow us to create and manage the group policies, allow and create us to do the LDAP authentication also, right? So if those are the things which is there, that something can be a very helpful, right? That's where the domain services, which is Active Directory domain services provided by Azure on a cloud, can help us, right? And it's completely managed services. We don't need to worried about anything. We just need to go ahead and create our users. At the same time, Azure Active Directory domain services get integrated with Azure AD. So in this case, what is going to be happen, right? As we told, integrated, whatever the users you are creating on Azure Active Directory will automatically get replicated to the Azure Active Directory domain services as well, right? And at the same time, if you are having your on-premise domain controller replicated to the Azure Active Directory, you don't need to be worried about anything else, because as soon as you created your managed domain in Azure and integrated with Azure ADs, all the user which is replicating from on-premise to Azure will automatically get replicated to the Active Directory domain service, which is the managed by Microsoft. Now, this help you to give like a seamless, or I can say a better user experience, because users are not going to know from where they are getting authenticated. Either they are getting authenticated from on-premise, or either they are getting authenticated from the Azure Active Directory domain services, right? And at the same way, when we are using this kind of scenario where we are replicating our on-premise Active Directory to the Azure, and from Azure to Azure Active Directory domain services, we can use our existing groups and users to share the all the resources, and can allow them to have the authenticate at the same time, and can allow them to access to all the resources using the secure channel, right? So these are the things which you will be going to get with Azure Active Directory domain services. At the same time, if you don't want to manage your on-premise Active Directory domain services, right? You are migrating your all the services to the cloud. You are no longer going to manage anything on the on-premise. That's where you can get rid of your on-premise Active Directory, and can help you to do the lift and shift, right? With Azure Active Directory domain services, it can help you to do the lift and shift, where you can simply move your domain controller from the on-premise to Azure by using the Azure Active Directory domain controller. It's completely a managed services. Well, here are the some of the features of using the Azure Active Directory domain services. Simplify the deployment experience, integrated with Azure AD. Use your corporate credentials and password. That's something is going to be happen when you're having your on-premise Active Directory synced with Azure AD, and then Azure AD can sync with the Azure Active Directory domain service. NTLM and Kerberos authentication, that is the one of the reason where Microsoft have introduced this managed services, because with Azure AD we cannot have a NTLM and Kerberos authentications, and that's where the legacy applications are not supporting with the Azure Active Directory, and that's where Microsoft introduced us a managed services called Azure Active Directory domain services, and that service is providing us the NTLM and Kerberos authentication. At the same time, We can also have your all the computers joined in the Azure Active Directory domain services, and we can set up the group policy on top of that as well. Highly available. Again, Azure Active Directory domain services are highly available. By default, Azure Active Directory domain services have a minimum 2 instance available to provide you the high availability. And it's also support the availability zones in which the domain controller will be getting distributed across the multiple data centers within the one region. And we can also have a replica set enabled and get them deployed in the another VNet or in the another region as well for our legacy applications. Well, this is how your reference architecture look like. And in your real-time scenario where you are replicating your on-premise Active Directory to Azure, and from Azure you are replicating to Azure Active Directory domain services, this is how it's going to be. So in the left side, you can see you have the domain controller, company A.local and company B.local, and all of them are getting synced to the Azure Active Directory using the AD Connect, and from there they are getting synced to the Azure Active Directory domain services, which is the completely a managed services. Now you might be thinking about from on-premise to Azure, I'm already using the Azure AD Connect to sync the Active Directory, right? How about Azure AD to Azure ADDS domain services, right? That something is going to be happen automatically because they are already linked to the each other. So whatever the changes is coming on the Azure Active Directory will automatically get replicated to the Azure Active Directory domain services. So in this way, whatever the changes you are doing it on on-premise will automatically get replicated to the Azure AD or the Azure Active Directory domain service. And then you can have this Active Directory domain services paired with another subscription and have the Azure Active Directory domain services deployed in your hub. And from there, you can have and expand it to the another spoke network as well. Well, what are the key components, right? So there are five key components like the Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Domain Services, Azure File, Azure Virtual Desktop, and the Virtual Network in the architecture. But we have only talked about Azure Active Directory and Azure Active Directory Domain Services. Again, like if you want to extend your Active Directory Domain Services to the AVD, or you want to extend it to the Azure file, that's something you can also do by enabling the Azure ADDS authentication on these components. Well, what are the cost is going to be? Again, Azure Active Directory domain services, Azure AD have their own charges, and for the Active Directory domain services, you need to buy a user cal license or the device cal license cost, and plus the infra cost to run it on Azure. Now, at the same time, if we talk about Azure Active Directory domain services, Azure Active Directory domain services are basically charged based on per hour and based on SKU basically which we select, and Azure Active Directory domain services available in user forest and the resource forest, right? At the same time, Azure Active Directory is kind of a license based services. We have three, I can say four additions for Azure Active Directory, like a free Office apps, premium, P1 and P2. These are the three, I can say four additions are available for the Azure Active Directory. Well, let's quickly move to the demo. So if you see, I have logged in my Azure subscription, and I have Azure Active Directory domain services deployed here. And if you go into the health, you will be able to see when the last backup is happened and when the last sync is happened. So if you see, it's automatically getting synced to the each other, and it's the last sync was happen on almost at the same time, and it's kind of continuous, right? At the same time, if you go into the new tab, and you will see like this is basically getting connected uh, to the Active Directory domain services, and they are getting replicated to the each other, right? So all of these users are there will be automatically available on this domain on this domain services, right? To how to access this domain services, how to access these domains, right? To have that, what you need to do, you need to have your managed VM and have it joined in this Active Directory domain services, and from there you will be able to get connect with uh, this Active Directory domain services powered by Azure. Now, how exactly it looks like, right? Let me show you the structure. Although the structure is going to be same as on-premise Active Directory. So this is how your structure is going to be, and this is how your users are going to be there. Although you would not be able to create any of the users, all the users and the groups need to be either need to be created on on-premise or either need to be created on the Azure AD. Right? If you have your on-premise AD synced enable, and that way everything is need to be created on on-premise Active Directory domain service. But if you don't have that and you directly have integrated with the Azure AD, that's where you only need to have user and group created on the Azure AD. At the same time, I have AD sync, and this AD sync is basically getting connected with this one. So this is the AD Connect server, and this AD Connect server is somewhere is getting connected with the Azure Active Directory domain service. Let me show you that as well. So if you go into the sync service, and you will see, so this is the one which is getting connected with my on-premise, and this is the one which is getting connected to the Azure. So whatever the changes which is going to be on my on-premise Active Directory, sync server is the one which is going to be replicate to the Azure AD, and from the Azure ADs, things will be going to replicate on the Azure Active Directory domain service. Well, that's it in the demo. I hope you like this video. If you like, please click on like and subscribe for more upcoming videos, and feel free to reach us if you have any questions. Thank you.